Okay, so we are still on this conversation here of canceling student loan debt. And I talked about this in RBN, but there's been more information that's come out, and I do want to make sure I talk about it on here as well. There is this line that's going around saying that canceling student loan debt will close the racial wealth gap. That is not true. Now, Ayanna Pressley here, again, she was in my district when she ran. I heavily supported Ayanna Pressley. I can't believe she's using this talking point now as well. She was recently interviewed. Shout out to Case Study QB for this clip. Listen to what she says about Biden canceling a portion of student loan debt. Listen to this.
Congresswoman Ayanna Pressley joins me now. She represents the 7th Congressional District in Massachusetts, which covers most of the Boston area. She's a member of the House Financial Services Committee. Congresswoman Pressley, good to see you this morning. Thank you for being with us. Having fought so hard for this, having seen the result, and now having seen the various embraces and criticisms of it, what's the way in which you present this to somebody?
Sure. Look, obviously, we would have loved to have been more ambitious in this. We want to advance policies and responses to the everyday struggles and needs of people that go as far and as deep as the hurt. That being said, our work is not done. The fight is not done. And for us to get us to invest in higher education as the public good that it is, with HBCUs and Pell Grants, tuition-free community college, and stabilizing other costs in people's lives.
Hold on to that HBCU part, because I'm going to show you something about that in a second.
And we cannot give short shrift to the real, meaningful, transformative relief that 43 million people will feel, disproportionately Black borrowers.
Let me talk about that for a second, because you and I have often talked about this, the historic inequalities, wealth inequalities between Black Americans and others. So
let's just pay attention here. They're about to go into the wealth inequality. Pay close attention to this.
To Andre Perry yesterday from Brookings. Here's a little of what he told me about this.
In terms of closing racial gaps, $10,000 of relief is negligible on closing the gap. $20,000 does a little damage. My colleague Carl Romer and I found that the more debt you eliminate, the more you close the racial wealth gap.
That is false. And I don't know why people are saying this. I really do not know why. Here's what you have to understand. When we talk about closing the racial wealth gap, the majority of African Americans do not have student loan debt. I'm going to say this one more time because people seem to think, I don't know. I hope this is not a surprise to a lot of people. But the majority of African Americans do not have student loan debt. The majority of African Americans are not attending college. The majority of African Americans after high school, and sometimes even during high school, they're working their asses off. Let me explain this again. I don't know why people are thinking this. The majority of African Americans do not attend college. Therefore, the majority of African Americans do not have student loans. If I were to take you back to my grandma's neighborhood in Baltimore, you think anyone in my grandma's neighborhood went to college? No. Do you see what I'm saying? People keep saying this. Now let's go on because Ayanna's going to echo the same sentiment. Hit that like button, guys. Let's keep it going here.
But so by capping it at 125,000, what you're essentially doing is missing the many middle income and upper middle income people of color and women who are making high incomes and did everything they were told to do in terms of getting an education, but they have significantly less wealth.
Now, I know you share some of that view, and this wasn't your policy, and had it been your policy, probably the numbers would have been higher. But how do you process that criticism?
It's important to remember where we started here. 2 years ago, this was an issue that people attempted to treat as fringe and to marginalize who was impacted by this nearly $2 trillion crisis. There was a false mischaracterization that this would be regressive in impact, only benefiting white graduate students who went to affluent universities. In 2 years, we have moved this in the national discourse to a response by the Biden administration to the coalition of voters that elected him. And mitigating the hurt that people are experiencing in the midst of a pandemic-induced recession and still feeling the effects of inflation. Black Americans have historically been locked out of federal relief programs, from the Homestead Act to the GI Bill to the New Deal. Today,
So she's right about this part. But wait for it.
Is the 59th anniversary of the March on Washington for Jobs and Freedom, a march for economic justice. This is an important step in the right direction. Black borrowers disproportionately are Pell Grant recipients. 1 in 4 Black borrowers will have their debt zeroed out. And I also just want to say this. I'm not using the term forgiveness because debtors have done nothing wrong. We've been told we live in a meritocracy. Education is the equalizer. In that meritocracy, this was supposed, higher education was supposed to close the racial wealth gap. It has only exacerbated. And that's why we've seen the HBCU presidents using ARPA funds to cancel student debt. That's why in 2 years, we've been able to build a coalition to include civil rights organizations like the NAACP and educators and grassroots organizers and organized labor. So this movement has grown because people shared their stories. And again, we held the administration accountable to a promise made on the campaign trail, and they have been responsive to that movement we grew over the last 2 years.
One of the things that she said there was that higher education was supposed to close the racial wealth gap. I disagree with that as well. How can that be the case if you don't have every African American being given the opportunity to go to college? How is it that, I don't know where people thought this from, but how is it that higher education was supposed to close the racial wealth gap when the majority of African Americans are not attending college? You guys see the problem? If we really want to talk about wages here, I think it's important to note that even if you do have a college degree, does that mean that you're going to be offered the same salary as your white peers? Not necessarily. So, well, what are we really talking about here? This don't really, I'm sorry. I wish more people would call this out. This is why it's important to listen to Black commentators. And some people are not going to like to hear this. But the one thing that will close the racial wealth gap is to give reparations to descendants of slavery in this country. And not just under slavery, not just for slavery, but because of Jim Crow too. That's actually how you would close the racial wealth gap, not by canceling student loans. Now, I want to make this very clear because I talked about this on Twitter and some people got all in their feelings. But I'm sorry. Am I for canceling student loan debt? Yes, I think all of it should have been canceled, which is what he promised, by the way. I'm going to get into that too in a second. But do I think that it will close the racial wealth gap? Hell no, I know it won't. And I'm going to show you the research that shows you that it won't. So why we got this talking point? Why are people saying this? Now, I told you guys that 10K to 20K, that's not enough. If you're like me and you went to grad school, this ain't really do that much. Just keep it real. This also does not include the other loans that people have taken out that are not federal loans. A lot of people have taken out private student loans because the federal loans, there's a certain max that you get each year. There's a limit, right? Well, if all of your financial needs are not met under the federal student loans, this is when people will turn to the private student loans, like the private lenders, like Sallie Mae does private loans, things like that. So if you have federal student loans and you have private student loans, this really ain't helping you either. Could have canceled all of it. And you know who else tends to agree when it comes to the amount? The president of the NAACP. Here's what he said. Now, this is Derek Johnson, and he tweeted this August 23rd. If student debt repayments can be paused over and over and over again, there's no reason why the president cannot cancel a minimum of $50,000. And let's remember as well, that actually was the amount that Elizabeth Warren and Chuck Schumer were asking for. They were asking for $50,000. Remember that? He goes on, he points out some good points here, and he reminded me of this. Again, this is the president of the NAACP. He tweeted, just circling back on this campaign promise. Now, again, this is from Joe Biden and Kamala Harris's campaign site. Forgive all undergrad tuition related federal student debt from 2- and 4-year public colleges and universities and private HBCUs and MSIs for debt holders earning up to $125,000. You notice this here? Forgive all, not 10,000, not 20,000. And some people have forgotten about this. Some people have forgotten that they made that promise that they would get rid of all of it. That's their website, not mine. Now we're going to go on because there's more here. Even Al Sharpton of all people, even he's going to come in and say it's not enough. Again, shout out here to Case Study QB. Again, he's always doing the damn thing. Listen to what he had to say here.
And Rev, you look at a couple of things that have passed or that the president has signed. The student loan relief, 54% approved, 46% disapproved. The Inflation Reduction Act, 55% approved, 45% disapproved. I have serious concerns with how the student debt relief bill was put together. Our act was put together for, my God, 1,000 reasons, none of which have anything to do with helping people out that are in a crunch. But I mean, we still have predatory lending. We still have colleges that are hiking tuition rates at grotesque rates, and they have been for the past 20 years. You know, for my education, I think undergrad, I paid $500 a semester and paid for law school $1,000 a semester. It's just grotesque how much these colleges are spending. I really would have preferred, for as big of a problem as this is, to have a more sweeping, a more global solution to this, because right now, only thing you're doing is pouring, seems to me, pouring more gas onto the fire and just telling colleges, yeah, go ahead and hike your tuition up another 300% over the next 15, 20 years. Mm-hmm.
But it's interesting that he's admitting that now, because when Bernie Sanders was on Morning Joe, when they interviewed him when he was running in 2020, Bernie Sanders was heavily pushing free public universities. Remember? See, this is the thing I want people to remember. Now, all of a sudden, all of these commentators like Morning Joe, now they want to admit, hey, there's a problem here with these universities charging these kids all this money. Hey, a lot of these kids are in a lot of debt. Something needs to be fixed. But they knew about this issue during the 2020 campaigns. They knew about it. They were told about it on their show. And what did they do? They pushed back and they smeared Bernie Sanders. They said he was too far left. They said he was radical. How dare he ask for these radical things? But now they admit to it. You see what it really was about? It really wasn't even about like the issues. They just didn't want him in. You see what I mean? Let's all remember, flashback. Now listen to what Al Sharpton has to say.
I think we can't underestimate the fact that 43 million Americans, young people and some older that wanted to do the right thing, couldn't afford it, but went into college anyway and built up this debt that has in many cases strangled them for decades. So they're the victims of their own good choice. And I think that what President Biden and has proposed here is good. But at the same time, I have to agree with you, we need a global solution to deal with the escalating and unfair rates that these colleges are getting away with, the predators that have exploited this, and to put Novocaine into a situation to stop the pain on 43 million. You still have to go and get the root cavity out of the problem, which we haven't done, because the Novocaine will wear off. And you
Didn't we talk about this in 2020? Wasn't this on several TV shows during 2020? Didn't Bernie Sanders talk about this on The View, on Morning Joe, on CNN? And they said, this is too much. This socialism is scary. Now, all of a sudden, it's okay to admit it. Do you see how the narrative works? They have the same talking points that come from the State Department. They have the same talking points that come from the U.S. government, that come from the White House. They echo what the White House is saying. This is what they do.
We'll still have people getting into debt if you don't deal with all of the surrounding issues here. So I agree with you in the long run, but I'm very happy to see that there's been some relief for some people that have been struggling for decades with bad credit, couldn't buy homes, couldn't build their wealth, had bad credit scores, only because they wanted to do the right thing with their lives. We preach to people, don't do things that are street life in many of our communities. Don't take bad choices. Go to school, be somebody. They did, and they ended up in debt. And I think there was a way we needed to relieve it.
That's the exact same thing that Bernie Sanders was telling them. It's okay for Al to admit it now. See how this works? Wasn't okay for them to admit it and agree with him, with Bernie Sanders when he was running, because their job was to smear him and prevent him from trying to get in. A lot of hypocrisy, Now, I told you before, in reference to these so-called, let me go to this one first. This closing the racial wealth gap thing. Now, this is from Sandy Darity. Sandy Darity is a professor at Duke University. His real name is William Darity, but he goes by Sandy. And he has done the research on this for a long time. This is not something that is new. He wrote a book, too, that you need to read as well. It's called From Here to Equality. Definitely check that out, where he talks about the need for reparations. But it is this point here, and I'm going to go all the way down to this segment here, because I know where this line is at. This piece right here, people need to pay very close attention to. Here we go. Whoops, I highlighted the whole thing. Just this paragraph here. At present, my calculations based upon the Fed's data indicate that Black American descendants of persons enslaved in the United States constitute about 12% of the nation's population, but own less than 2% of the nation's wealth. These figures indicate why policies, listen to this, like forgiving all student debt and providing universal baby bonds to the entire population won't nearly be enough. These programs are worthwhile and I support them. So for the shit libs that's going to come at me, he says he does support those programs. Now let's go back in. In fact, I helped design an early baby bonds proposal. While these approaches can do good to help both the poor and the middle class, listen up, folks, they won't close the Black-white wealth gap. And he explains why right about here. Let me make it bigger. I think this font's a little small. Okay. First, consider student debt. Black Americans would gain disproportionately from student loan debt relief because they have larger average levels of higher education debt, 23,400 compared to 16,000 for white students. After accounting for the higher enrollment rate of white students, erasing student debt would result in an average Black gain in wealth of $8,424 and a white gain of $6,560. This translates into a reduction in the racial wealth gap of less than $1,900. Do you guys see that? It would reduce the medium gap of 54,700 by 3% and the mean gap of $300,000 by less than 1%. This is it doesn't close the racial wealth gap. See the problem? And this goes on. Eric, feel free to share this this link to this in the comments section, because he goes on to talk about why baby bonds wouldn't close the racial wealth gap either. This piece right here. Whoopsie. Here we go. In short, the notion that either student debt forgiveness or baby bonds taken separately or in combination will erase the racial wealth gap would be sheer mystification. Both policies are desirable for a number of reasons, but making extravagant claims about their impact on Black-white differences in net worth is disingenuous. That's right, public domain. It's called math. You see the problem? If you're just tuning in, I'll echo this again. The majority of African Americans don't have student loan debt because the majority of African Americans do not attend college. The majority of African Americans after high school are working their asses off. Sorry, but that's just the reality. So let me move this over here. Again, that is from Sandy Darity. Guys, you need to follow. If you don't follow him on Twitter, follow him on Twitter, follow him on social media. Check out his book. Again, he's done a lot of research on this, especially when it comes to reparations. Marianne Williamson actually worked with Sandy Darity on what would be the best reparations plan for her campaign when she ran for president. So Marianne Williamson knows this too. I don't know why people don't seem to want to say the R word, but what Ayanna Pressley should say is that what would really close the racial wealth gap is reparations. But apparently that's a scary word and you're not allowed to say it. Thank you for sharing that, Eric. Thanks so much. Now, I do have to say this. I do remember Joe Biden making some pretty significant statements when it came to what he would cancel for student loans. And I had to remind myself, maybe, I just imagined that. Maybe I misheard. Apparently, I did not. And here's the video to prove it. We're about to fact check this bad boy in just a second. Let's all remember what he said.
President Biden is considering plans to forgive some student loan debt, but some activists say the proposals he's looking at now don't measure up to the promises he made on the campaign trail. One viral tweet reads, quote, Biden ran on canceling all your federal student debt if you went to an HBCU or public college and make under $125,000.
Yeah, I don't hear many people mentioning that. What happened to that promise that Joe Biden made to students that went to historically Black colleges and universities that he would cancel all of their student loan debt if they were under that 125 figure there? What happened to that? See, I bring this up and a lot of people are like, oh yeah, I forgot he said that. I didn't forget. Let's go on. There's more.
Let's verify. When he was running for president, did Joe Biden propose forgiving all federal student debt for borrowers who attended public or historically black colleges and have annual incomes below $125,000? Our sources, a post on Medium by then candidate Biden, the Democratic Party, and video from a town hall held in Miami a month before the election. In April of 2020, Biden wrote a blog post about his ideas for helping out folks struggling in the pandemic economy. One of those ideas, quote, I propose to forgive all undergraduate tuition-related federal student debt from 2- and 4-year public colleges for debt holders earning up to $125,000. He said this would also apply to HBCUs and MSIs, minority-serving institutions. The same language appeared in the official Democratic Party platform, which was approved at the 2020 Democratic National Convention. And then, during an NBC town hall in October of 2020, Biden referenced a version of the same plan when answering a question about the economic obstacles facing young people.
That's why I'm going to eliminate a lot of your student debt if you, in fact, if you come from a family less than 125 grand and you went to a public university.
So we can verify, yes, when he was running for president, Joe Biden proposed forgiving all federal student debt for borrowers who attended public or historically black colleges and have annual incomes below $125,000. With your Verify, I'm Casey Decker.
Thanks, Casey. Just wanted to jog your memory there. So I had to check with myself too. I'm like, am I imagining this? But I could have sworn he made this this statement here. So that's that. That answers that question. I'm gonna go to some of the comments here. Roman says, where is this $10,000 house I can sign up for? I'm trying to figure that out too, Roman. I don't know, Roman. And by the way, that's not even enough for a down payment on a house here. So just letting you know. Chris says canceling student debt won't close the racial wealth gap. Reparations will. Exactly, Chris. Juliet says, thank you for supporting reparations for descendants of slavery. You are welcome, Juliet. Of course. Angry Lefty says, sorry, we can't give you reparations. That money needs to go to Ukraine. What? Angry Lefty coming in with the right hook. That was pretty good, Angry Lefty.